Hi, everyone. Welcome to Working with Designers, a podcast where we discuss how businesses and designers work together to make an impact. I'm Kristin Silva, and alongside co-host Jake Cooper, we're here to share our insights gathered from 12 years of working as professional designers, as well as the gripes, humor, and discussion that goes on behind the scenes. So let's dive in.
Max for the first couple of minutes.
Go wherever we want.
Yeah, we'll go wherever we want. So how's your week been?
It's been, it's Monday. We're doing this on a Monday. So
It's our first time recording at the start of the week. We usually do Wednesdays.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
I celebrated my mom's birthday this last weekend.
Aw.
So I cooked her a cake, baked her a cake.
Nice. Did you do the custom size cake you were talking about?
Actually, no, I did like a standard 9-inch round. There was a lot of us. So I did a berry chantilly cake. Do you know what that is?
Ooh. What's the chantilly part? I get confused.
I should Google that. I don't even know. It's considered like a lighter cake, but I'll tell you, I don't know if I would consider it that light. Okay, so the cream is a light mascarpone chantilly cream. So it must be the frosting. So the frosting it called for cream cheese, whipped cream, and mascarpone. So it was lighter and whipped.
Okay.
So yeah, so that, and then it has berries, and it's a vanilla cake. Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah.
Love a baking story.
Yeah, well, I thought it was going to be lighter, but it was definitely decadent and dense. But yeah, so that was my weekend. So I'm coming out of a baking weekend, and I'm ready to work, be in design mode. But it's been a little slow because, when you have holiday or family gatherings on the weekend, it's a little,
Yeah.
How about you?
Everything slows down.
Yeah. How was your weekend?
Yeah. It was good. Saturday was kind of unremarkable. We got snowed in. We got a foot of snow between Saturday and Sunday. So it was really pretty, but it's you can't go anywhere. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was super nice. And then Sunday, I had a long kind of hangout chat with Space Out. And I got to pick their brains on niching a little bit. So I have some inside knowledge that we could talk about. Because they're going through kind of a similar question of how do we niche? How can we do it effectively? How important is it? Kind of all the good questions.
To niche or not to niche?
To niche or not to niche? To niche.
To niche.
Yeah.
I've been told, I overheard because we're, we're new at this whole podcast thing. I've been trying to, I think the last time we talked, I was saying how I've been dipping in and out of all different kinds of design podcasts to just kind of see the landscape we're in and get, different inspirations and stuff. And a designer I was just listening to was talking about niching and was it seems like it's got such a negative term. It's the same thing as saying I'm specialized in ...
Yeah.
And when you say it that way,
Yeah.
it's well, yeah, we all want to be specialized in something, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, that's the thing. It's there's some things that you want to kind of be a jack of all trades in, that you're a synthesizer, you're connecting all the different things, and then maybe that is your specialization, being the connector. But yeah, in many fields, you do want to be I do one thing and I focus on that. I'm really developed, the T-shaped employee, as some people call it. But some people are just I-shaped and don't have that baseline of how all the things connect.
What do you mean by I-shaped and T-shaped? I don't know if I've ever heard that.
You ever heard that term? Okay.
No.
So it's specializing. You develop a lot of skills in one specific area. And if you were graphing all the potential skills you could have on an x-axis, you'd have one and you would be a single bar going up on the y, if y is the amount of expertise. So people say to be effective at that one high specialization, you really need to have a baseline in all the other subjects too, so you know how that can relate. And that's what the T is, that bottom bar is like just having a little bit of knowledge in that one space. There's another analogy of the V-shaped employee, which is like you develop a lot of expertise in areas and not just one singular focus in the middle. You develop all the adjacent kind of expertises. So you're building, like if brand strategy is one, you also have a little bit of marketing, you have a bit of actual design, you have all the kind of carry through specialties going down, but it all points towards one singular focus, which I would say we're probably more V-shaped than T. Like we're not fully like just doing everything and challenging everything and learning everything, but we do learn a lot that all complement each other. So in the letter analogy, I is someone who's completely focused on one thing and that thing only.
A subject
maybe
matter
to a
expert,
fault.
almost.
Yeah.
Like you're thinking animation, boom.
Right.
Or
and
illustration.
I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to do any concepting or any of that.
Yeah,
I just know how to do keyframes.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah,
the most narrow of
oh,
all.
yeah. I don't know about that. I've
Yeah.
seen your drawings.
Oh, well, I can't. I mean, I don't know how to do any of that stuff anyway. I was just speaking in terms of like an eye-shaped person.
Okay. I thought you were
confusing when person. I say I. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
I can't
sure,
draw.
You can do that.
I can't. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was doing some research and heard that there is, or I learned, I should say, that there's a difference between specialization and niching. And it has to do with specialization is what you're good at. Niching is what the audience expects. Let me see if I can find the exact quote.
We're gonna jump into label theory, I bet you.
Oh, yeah.
So some people think it's this, and some people think it's this. But if you can convince them that this, and this is all boiled down from the same word, we're in the same.
Oh, God, now I can't find it.
Well, I can jump in, but I don't want to detract you from if you have something that you want to specifically call out. I want to give you that.
No, well, maybe we should do like an intro. Should we do an intro for the podcast? Should we?
I mean, we can. I think people are probably already understanding that this is going to be about niching, but...
Yeah, that's true.
Jake, so what are we talking about this week?
We're talking about niching, Kristin, and why it's important and what you should do about it. And, oh God, it's fucking confusing.
Yeah, it's so confusing. So for everyone that's listening, we actually had a preliminary call to talk about this last week. I sent Jake a text and I said, hot on the brain, niching. And I think your reply was like, same. And I was like, okay, we need to have this conversation. It's probably not just us two as designers at the beginning of 2025 in Q1, thinking about the saturation of the market, the technology constantly changing. We're constantly being asked to learn new skills in all facets from marketing to animation, 3D, and we're still on the same funnel from originally being graphic designers like 12 years ago. So we want to talk about that and the positives, negatives, everything in between.
Yeah.
Sounds like Jake's typing.
I know. I'm doing some live research on the side too, just trying to pull stuff. Come on, ChatGPT. Yeah. I mean, I struggle with niching because I feel like I focus so much on doing good work and like understanding how to do good work, that it's applicable across a lot of different audiences. So having to kind of limit to one person has always been a struggle. And the times that I have niched, I've run into the problem of like, okay, I can make something for a specific audience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to pay any more for it or that it's any more profitable or any easier to like get in front of them. So there's a lot of like complicated considerations when you start niching that hopefully we can make some sort of cheat sheet for.
I have a quick question for you. Have you tried actively niching? Have you tried at all? I know you've been doing freelance, for better of the last decade, even though it's full-time this year. Throughout all of that, have you ever tried niching?
Well, I have in the sense, I've tried two different things. I currently niche down to a specific size of business rather than a particular industry. And that's kind of what's been working for my own sanity. I don't know if it's necessarily working for audiences, but I think it does. So like I try and work with clients that are like between 1 and 10 people big. So like relatively small. Maybe they're even a team in a department of a much larger company. And I work on a very specific set of services with them, like building a website, building brand strategy, and tying the two together for long-term use within that company. So rather than doing like I do presentations and advertising and booklets and all these things, that's what I actively say that I do. And in the past, I've been like, okay, I'm going to be a graphic designer for people in the financial industry. And here's all the things that I do. And like that was so vague and didn't really work. And I have no particular advantage in marketing to them as a person. Like I have no way to reach them that I know of without. I have no special like advantage there. So yeah, like, and it always felt like it was hard to pick a niche. Like, who do I actually care about? What types of customers do I want to work with over and over? And who do I not want to work with? Who I don't want to work with has been easier to figure out. But yeah, it's like a complicated thing. And it feels like it's so pressurized. Like it seems like everybody's advice is you need to niche down immediately. You need to start doing this.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to ask, do you feel the same pressure?
I think so. And I think that you brought up an interesting situation or an interesting like concept of it that I think a lot of the advice, at least for a long time, maybe not now, but a lot of the advice was around, can you hear my phone going off? Whoops. Okay.
No, I can't.
Sorry. I just put it on silent. Sorry. What was I going to say? Yeah. So I think a lot of the advice that was kind of like, I don't know, out there in the world for a while, or at least in front of my eyes, was that you had to pick a industry. Niching meant industry.
Yeah.
And I think you just brought up a great point that actually there's a lot of things that organically start to niche or become more familiar when you actually look at different ways of niching, where, you know, a company that's 1 to 10 people, I mean, you could cross over in multiple industries, but that 1 to 10 people is going to give you certain levels of expectation, approval rounds, the amount of involvement, the amount you can kind of over time see that the values are, and there's synergies between those different kinds of companies, whether it's someone in finance or someone in, you know, consumer or whatever. So
yeah.
I think that's actually like pretty smart to call out because that's definitely something that I've also noticed that I've been trying to be more careful about, because it's also one of those things where, like, when you think of, let me take a step back here. When you think of niching, there is a level of, so for me, I've done B2B. I am more direct to consumer clients.
Yeah. Can we even take another step back and just go over like what is niching for people that are unfamiliar?
Yeah. You want me to jump in?
Not to completely derail, but I do think like maybe for people that are confused or want to know about it, how do you define niching?
Being just selective in your being able to have a selective yes and no's to who you're working with so that you can scale, so that you can build expertise in a specific area. So when you think of it as an analogy, say you have 3 cars, okay? They're going down a path and you have 3 pathways with the 3 cars. Each car will only get 50 miles out of it before it runs out of gas. So you can either go 50 miles in 3 directions and get 50 miles far in 3 directions, or you can go 150 miles in 1 direction. Yeah. So it's this idea of getting further into your specialty and expertise by kind of not doing everything for everyone. And the thought behind that and the advice behind that is to make you more profitable, essentially.
And to get a better result, you know, just by having deeper knowledge of the subject and more experience in one area.
Yeah, it all works together then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like if you have all that focus in one area, you would be better at it. It's easier in competition.
And beyond just like developing more knowledge in a specific area, getting to go further, it's also a benefit to the business owner, like you, the person trying to sell services, because you have a specific target in mind. It allows you to focus your efforts on one specific audience and cater your maybe services or your abilities better for that specific type of person. And rather than having to make things that appeal to everybody, you can make a more specific thing focused on one person.
I think in addition to that, though, it's also, when you think of it, there's two aspects, right? So the marketing aspect, it's, far more refined. You're not really pulling at straws from a marketing standpoint, because you have a clear direction of where to look for this specific kind of client. So once you niche, that's a huge benefit. And then in addition to that, when you are in a competitive space, say you're up against like 30 people, right, for the same job, the specialist will always outbeat the generalist. Always.
Maybe.
Disagree?
I'm saying usually. I'm giving my devil's advocate hat on to be like, well, there are some times, but you have an advantage for sure.
I think you have. I think it's 9 times out of 10.
Being more gray on this rather than black.
Yeah.
But
I'm curious. So for you, when you don't win projects, do you follow up with them and ask where they've gone, who they've gone to? Because I do that. That's why I'm saying this.
Yeah. And when they do, it's usually a matter of price and like the amount of work they can get for the price, which is fine, but it's not.
Interesting.
I don't know, like exactly why they pick that. I don't know how that business can necessarily prove that they have more better things for that. I don't know. But that's usually why.
For me, it's usually when I do lose clients or potential prospects, rather, it's because they found someone that is highly special, like highly niche.
I'll say, well, this is kind of a weird aside. The only projects I lose are
okay.
Like most of the time when somebody's coming to me to try and work on something, we figure out a way to work. So if they're inbound, then usually that means we're going to do something rather than nothing.
Interesting.
That's just my experience. Not that I have figured something out or have some sort of advantage, but usually when clients are reaching out to you to work together, they're already invested, which is kind of like the way you want it to be.
Yeah. So the only ones that I lose are RFPs.
Yeah. Right.
But the ones that I've won in the RFPs are through my niche.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
So.
Yeah.
But anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jake and I, needless to say, are thinking about niching more or rethinking it in the line of our businesses this last week and how we can maximize that.
Yeah, I think it came up for me in the last week because I've been taking on a lot of work that I don't want to be doing. Like that's the short and sweet of it. I feel like I'm most effective at kind of web projects and brand projects specifically. Not that I can't do the things that I'm currently doing and I'm not going to do a good job. I'm going to do a good job. But in terms of like the types of customers that ask for that kind of work and just the work relationship of trying to figure those things out, it's just not my preference. And I feel like my time as a finite resource is better spent helping with these bigger problems than these littler problems. So I'm trying to figure out how I can create something that's both more appealing for a specific audience, more advantageous for a specific audience, and that I can, catalyze on the various expertise that I've gathered into like one singular thing. But there's also like, okay, so I found this quote that I was talking about before. There's a challenge I'm finding between like my own sense of specialization and niching as an audience focus. In the book, This is Marketing by Seth Godin, which is a really good book, by the way. I recommend it for anybody that's in the marketing fields in any capacity. He says, specialization is a function of craft. You refine your skills to be the best in a particular area. Whereas niching is a function of audience focus. It's you learning their psychology, language, and pain points. And I think the two ideas, as we kind of did in the beginning, get intertwined in a way that's worth separating. Like you specialize in a number of different skills. Everybody.
Me, personally.
Me and you. Yeah. And you and everyone we know specialize in like a particular set of skills, like intake it. And niching itself is not necessarily about developing your skills. It's about finding an audience that's right for those skills and finding an audience that has a particular problem that can be solved by those skills. So it's not really like something that you do. It's something that you like respond to. That's kind of my new way of thinking about the two. And in my personal example, I feel like I've gathered some specialization in a number of areas, and now I'm trying to figure out what is the right audience focus. So what types of patterns can I find that I can capitalize on?
It also, I think, a good thing to think about too is definitely aligning these thoughts and theories with whatever marketing strategy you're looking to lean into.
Yeah.
Because it isn't, while niching isn't necessarily cut clear and dry, like the equation is a little open, as you've kind of explained.
Yeah.
There are certain marketing tactics that if you do choose to implement, you do have to be a little more literal with, that people, you know, if someone Googles, like, I want to work with a designer specialized in fintech, they're going to put fintech brand designer or graphic designer.
Right.
So there is this aspect that while we are talking about, and I think that you are correct, and I do like the reference that you created, there is this awareness that we need to, you know, bring to the marketing aspect of that.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key to unlocking it. That there is a separation between you developing expertise in a particular craft versus what the audience is looking for and finding the right size and shape of audience to fit that craft. I think that's where a lot of people, including myself, struggle, is like finding the match. And knowing how to effectively make use of both of those things.
Yeah.
But I think I want to hear more about your struggles or challenges, ideas with niching, because I think you have been / could, if you wanted to, niche to a very particular audience.
Yeah. So I actually started pretty selective with my audience back in 2017. And it was actually purpose-driven. I keep saying mission-driven, but it's really like these are paid private companies that are, at first it was startups. So I didn't start with like growing companies, but it was startups that were in the like purpose-driven consumer goods space. And yeah, I actually got my first client from a like commissioned, like I did my own uncommissioned kind of piece. So like just like a conceptual piece in my portfolio. I had no single piece of packaging in my portfolio at the time. I had just jumped out of working, you know, in agency world. And I had some good names on my roster already in terms of like e-commerce. And so I was in the consumer space, but yeah. So that's where I started.
Yeah.
Long story short. CPG. And then through that portfolio, which I think often people will see, what they'll do is really cool, like a really, really cool opportunity comes up that's not in your specialty, but they reacted to your portfolio. So, you know, you're like, yeah, I'll take that. And then you take another one that's also not in your niche. And then you take another one and another one. It does make things kind of interesting, right? Because then I'm not saying, hey, you're less on the offense, more on the defense side of the whole business building, where you're not now shouting in a microphone, hey, I do these services for these people. People are starting to see your work, and then they're like, oh, I want to work with you. So then I'm not in that niche anymore, right? Because then now I'm having a portfolio kind of built outside of the consumer space.
I would say yes if your portfolio changed.
Yeah.
But really, yeah. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead.
I was
just going to, yeah.
This is like where I feel like the separation between specialization and niche is like prevalent, where it's like niching is something you project, and it's a projection in response to an audience need versus you developing skills separately. Like, I think your niching is whatever the intentional effort is to present a curated front in a particular like named and claimed audience. So if you ended up saying, I'm a CPG brand designer, I help with XYZ for CPG brands, that I would say is niching. But if you're just having a portfolio and saying I'm a designer, not that this is what you're doing, but if you just say I have a lot of CPG projects, but I am a brand designer writ large, that's not necessarily niching itself.
Exactly. So I started in niching, and then I expanded out and wasn't niching for a while. And
just laughing. If my explanation sounds dumb, it's because I'm thinking about it at the same time as talking about it.
I think it's cool that we're unpacking it.
I'm like speaking.
It's very technical. We're getting very technical into it. Yeah. So then from there, I wasn't just basically food. I shouldn't even say consumer. It was food and beverage that I was working with. And then food and beverage then expanded. I was still in the consumer space, but then I was doing like lifestyle products. And then I was taking on some education, youth education of nonprofit sort of style work, which is totally different than the consumer space. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this week was last week, while you were kind of in the throes of thinking about that for your own business, I'm over here thinking about, I have this strong referral base and things have really, I think, have gone pretty well, but I'm not marketing. Like I'm not actively marketing, and I'd like to. I'd like to be a little more in control of that. And like you, I think most things that come in the door with me are already kind of a good fit. Like people see I have enough stuff out there that people kind of know what I'm about and my practice. So that's not a problem. But I think that I should be a little more intentional and a little more selective. And I'm not really at a place where I would be lying if I said that I could be super selective. I mean, I have a selective base defined through my work, but it would be nice to have more calls and be even more selective within that space. And that's why I'm where I'm at with thinking about this.
And I think I feel like that's a place we all get to where we're taking on projects, we do good work, they're good clients, but you're almost like wondering, like, why are they picking me specifically? Is there like a category I can put them into that I can better reach them by if I say it, kind of thing, Or should I be turning down work so that I can maintain a particular category? It's like a weird limiting question, I guess. Like, should I filter people out?
I can't remember the book that I read. This was a long time ago, and it was about exactly that. And the recommendation was actually that you are doing more harm to yourself by accepting people that are not quite, because you're not streamlining anything in your specialty. When you start at, it starts being like, oh, I'm going to do this for maybe, even if you do the same thing for another, like someone outside of what you've kind of built as your, we'll say, skills of awareness, right? So whatever that 1 to 10 person team is for you, they want some digital outputs. Maybe they have some print that they need you on, but mostly you're, a digital designer, digital strategist in that capacity. You're working on high level. You're probably executing some things that are low hanging fruit. But in general, that landscape, right? So then you have that other person that's just totally out there, and maybe they could be and there's a difference too between a 1-person team and a 10-person
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can get into that too. And then also, what phase of business are they at? Are they a startup or is this an established brand? So anyway, so many variables, but whatever those variables you have, when you take yourself and you put it into a place where those variables are totally different, you now can't use the same process that you've used. You're learning and you're educating, and you can't really bill in a way. I don't know. I think all of our brains, you can't really bill for that because you're building that. And it's also slowing down your timeline because it's new. So you can't, what's the price point for that? Whatever it is, you're not making the profit compared to the other.
Right. Like I guess the reasons why you would want to niche is that you develop better practices for yourself and develop a better product in the end by having all this knowledge on what works and what doesn't work. And that by not choosing a niche, you're missing out on those kind of valuable opportunities to push your worth, essentially, and the perceived worth of the clients. And at the same time, I feel like as you niche, you change the types of customers that come to you. So it's a little bit of both like influencing not just the quality of your own work, but the quality of customers, because people that are seeking like the one-stop shop, the jack of all trades, they're going to be more interested in price than they are on like what you can actually do, versus if they come with a specific problem and are seeking out a specialist or a niched business, they are going to be looking at like your ability to make effective change rather than just what you cost or what your price is. So it like shifts a lot of different things for you as the business owner that could be to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. And like to that point, I wonder, can we bring up when is a bad time to niche? When should it be best to be a generalist? I have some opinions on that, but I'm curious if you have thought about that as well.
Feel like the best time to niche is whenever you can.
Really?
So like the earliest, the better.
Okay.
But you need to be able to do it effectively. Like you need to have a real like valuable insight that you can capitalize on. And that doesn't happen right away. Like I'm trying to find the exact quote, but I think it's another one from Seth Godin where he's like, it's not something you just set and change in an instant. It's something you develop over time. It's something that takes a long time to get crafted, and you don't have to have it all figured out right from the beginning. And I think that's what stopped me from like doing a lot more than I could, like thinking I have to have it perfect, like that perfectionist mindset. But I do think like that the value is there if you can do it. So why not? If you're in that space. But I think you have to be able to prove it. And that's really where people struggle. Like if you're going to say, I'm this kind of designer for this audience, you need to be able to actually demonstrate it. And if you can't, it's going to bite you in the ass.
Yeah. I think, I guess to me, I think it depends on like, how critical it is for you at the time of thinking about this. If you're thinking about this, I'm guessing it's a very critical time, probably. But I do want to say, I do think that there is this level of freedom and exploration as a designer, as you're kind of building your portfolio to try out niches.
Yeah.
However you want to define that. And yeah, I think that there's a bit of fake it till you make it too, like what you're saying, but maybe a little more so that it's like, you could initially start and say, hey, this is what I'm going to niche in, and you did your research and you did your like market landscape, competitor landscape, whatever you're doing to kind of base the logic and reasoning on that niche. And you can always change it. But I do think that, it's okay to be a generalist sometimes too, when like the market has shifted or you're not interested in the work that you're doing or you're trying to kind of redefine that space. I do think it's okay to take a moment and change that, but you're in a space where it's not going to be efficient. You're doing a lot of work in that space.
I think I agree, but I also don't see a situation where being a little bit more clear about who you serve or how you serve them is a disservice to you.
Say again?
I agree in that, like, I don't think you should be a specialist necessarily right out of the gate, and you need to like develop some expertise before you can fully claim that. But I think what I'm trying to do is like deconstruct the idea of niching to be this like perfectionist pursuit where like I fit into a category, I fit into a box, and I have this one thing that I do. Whereas it's more of like an ongoing practice of just refining what you do to more and more specific of an audience. Like I would say if you're a generalist designer, maybe you serve a very particular client that's worth talking about in your marketing or talking about in your sales presentation. And that itself is an act of niching down to like category client. Doesn't necessarily have to be by industry. It could be by, I work with people that need to have a lot of different touch points, and I do a good job of synthesizing all those things.
Well, I argue though, is that starting to talk about differentiation as opposed to niching?
I had this thought too, where I was like, is niching different from positioning? Isn't it just kind of the same thing?
I think it's different.
Yeah.
I think it's different. I think it's different because I think that I don't know. It's like it's baking in my head right now.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that. But
see, we're both like, we see how convoluted the terms are at this.
I know, it really is. Well, yeah. Okay. I think that differentiation is like kind of going back to like what people say about you. What do people say after they work with you? You know, what do you give them? What do you give them? Not maybe tangible, but what relief, whatever. You know what I mean? I think that when you start thinking about it that way, that's when you start getting into the differentiation of you and your services. Niching, I think, is more of like a way of sieving out people based on the variables of data that we have, right? So how big are they? How much money do they yield? And that's because a $10 million company and a $50 million company need different systems. That doesn't mean that, which means there's different packages. You cannot give the same package to the two. It's a totally different framework. How many people, decision makers, how much money, like how big are they revenue wise? How big are they maybe people wise? And maybe you have one or the other as a specific, doesn't mean you have both. And then you can get into more details from that where it's, I think there's larger things like a B2B and a B2C and a direct to consumer are different. Are different.
Totally
things.
Different niches. Yeah.
Totally just totally different strategies. Yeah. To business. And then beyond that, then you have or within that, you also then have subcategories. So I think that you can, I think differentiation is more of a character as opposed to this concrete, hey, I'm going to work with $10 to $15 million companies. They have 100 people working for them and they're direct to consumer or whatever. You know what I mean?
But isn't that just positioning at the same time or differentiation? I feel like it's all one and the same, I
don't think it is.
Why?
Because I think differentiation is what you bring to the table, not who you service.
Okay.
So,
wouldn't that be specialization? Just to throw in like
differentiation?
I feel like it's all connected and convoluted and weird. It's all like,
okay,
I do things better. I do some things better than others. And then positioning is like how you call that out amongst your competition so you have an advantage so that you can be different. Differentiation, positioning, same thing in my mind. And then niche is really just the bucket. It's just what the audience calls themselves. So it's like they're all connected. They're all ways of refining what you do, I guess, or ways of narrowing down both what you do and who you serve.
Yeah. I mean, did I confuse?
I don't know. This whole thing is so confusing. And so this is why it's like, I feel like it's such an important thing to talk about and just express there's so many ways to trip over your own words talking about this that it's like getting on the same page is a challenge.
Well, let me tell you a little bit of a personal reflection. Maybe we pull out of these jargon things for a sec. Just kind of talk about our general current personal pain points.
Yeah.
For me, I think what I'm having a difficult time with is that I am getting people coming to me, and my strengths are very much in the strategy component of things. And that's what delivers the results I can deliver through the visual designs and visual outputs. But people get really excited about the visual designs. So I have been always kind of promoting my visual aesthetics a little, or whatever you want to call them. That, that's forward, and I'm kind of, the strategies are unfold when they start talking to me, and I send them capabilities decks and so forth, and introduction decks and so forth. But their initial reaction is just visual. And so I thought that was a cool and interesting strategy at first, because I was like, okay, I can kind of give them a little bit more behind the scenes on my own terms. Well, once they get in the door, they're only excited about the visuals, and they don't necessarily understand the connection of strategy and how strategy informs visuals. That's where I'm at. So now when I'm thinking of all of this differentiation and niching and positioning, I'm looking at, our forever project, updating the portfolio, updating the website. And so I'm here saying, well, should I, and I don't want to totally table flip anything, but as I have the ability, I have the bandwidth right now to kind of focus on that as I'm seeing people come in and talk to me and what they're seeing of me, and, just that general reflection. I'm like, I need to be a little more strategy focused, because people aren't quite getting that. They're kind of looking at the jewels, if you will, the gems on my hand, not like that bigger thing. So, what do you think about that in regards to just being another strategist and hearing that?
Well, yeah, I feel like every client comes into the relationship only wanting the deliverable, and then you kind of have to step in and be like, well, in order to get that, I need to do this process. And there's maybe an argument there, maybe there's not. But when they come in and they say oh, you do strategy, not just the visuals, we can't just get the visuals, is that them trying to question your price, or is it just something you're noticing them do and they inevitably work with you?
I think it's a newer problem. I've never had this problem as frequently as now.
What is the exact problem? What exactly is the problem? Just that they don't know what you do and you want them to know? Or
I think it's a little more unique. I think that recently I usually work with larger clients. I usually work with a certain size. And so for whatever reason, recently, I think with a lot of the layoffs and stuff, that has happened, and people are just kind of there's a lot of people that are moving into doing small businesses now. I've just had more inquiries in the small business realm. So maybe that's just me kind of highlighting this and thinking about this, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that wherever you are at, whether you are a small business or a large business, the emphasis of strategy has to be learned, I think. And people don't realize that without strategy, we're picking straws to get to the visual design. And so if we don't have an underlying storyline or anything, getting into these subjective waters, getting into the subjective territory of brand design gets very complicated and very costly for no reason.
Yeah.
So I think I'm in a situation, I'll be honest, I think I'm in a situation where this person can't afford my services. It's probably going to be a dead end, honestly. That's what I'm thinking. And so maybe I'm just kind of emphasizing this because this is fresh in my week. But it makes me think that maybe I should have a little more strategy in my portfolio and less just the visuals. I don't know. What do you think? How do you position yourself with a lot of strategy. You have a lot of strategy on your website, I think. No?
Kind of. I do. I mean, I make claims, but having
claims.
I don't know. How fucking bougie does that sound?
No. I thought it was more, honestly, I thought it was more diplomatic of a response.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, I think I state a specific audience on my website where I help build brand systems for service-based businesses, like service provider businesses. That's kind of the claimed niche that I'm targeting. But I get clients from all over. And I think that's okay. Like, I think you take as many of those clients as you need to. And like, if I were to niche down, I would start turning more of them away. But, the needs of business and money is you only turn away what is strategic. And once you cover your bases, then you can be selective. But when I heard when you were explaining like what's going on, in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, you're getting a lot of inquiries. It sounds great. Like that's a good problem to have. But the question, it sounds like, is either how can I create a product that serves them that they're willing to pay for, that I would be interested in, and maybe there's not because their budget's not big enough relative to the amount of time it would take and what it would cost you to do. Or the second part of that is how can I better position myself, market myself to get a different audience rather than these inquiries. And I think those are two opportunities rather than two problems. And to relate, I'm kind of getting into the smaller scale of that, where I'm getting a lot of inquiries from people that I want to help but can't because they can't afford what it would cost me to do.
Yeah.
And the way to, what I'm thinking about that is like, I could either create something that's scalable, that still gives them value, that is within their budget, that I can spend less time on, still get paid like appropriately. Like, I'm not trying to just take advantage of these people, obviously.
No.
But you want to give them something that they can actually get value from at a reasonable price. And there's some kind of disconnect. But what that means is either creating like a template or some kind of like streamlined process. It's not going to be the full strategic, like maximum value that they could be getting for how long it would take me to do. So in that equation, you're kind of figuring out like, what do they value right now? Is it having the maximum value, impact, design, or do they just need something that can get done under budget in time and moves them further along? And then where do you want to be on that gradient?
Well, what's tough about this is I think that that's the ideal scenario, right? Where they're like, well, I just need to get here, or I have this amount and I want to get here, or whatever. I think that in my situation, they're looking for ROI and no strategy. And I'm like, how do I do that?
Right.
I wish I could. I don't know how to do that. ROI is strategy,
Well, that's that's where niching could come in. If you have the same audience over and over, you do strategy once and apply the same strategy. That's the upside of niching. Because then everybody's basically paying for the same strategy that just evolves over time.
Totally.
But you need to have something that is both strategic and valuable that you can implement while not literally just copy and pasting at the same time. Like, that's the weird gray area, right?
So I am curious to know, from your perspective, have you found, like, over the 8 years that I've worked in business, I have processes totally that I do streamline in terms of like how to get to this, how to get to that. This is my deck for positioning and messaging and all of these other things. However, there is a good level of my work. Every project is custom to a degree, like to a solid degree. So it's very difficult when I have these wonderful, super talented people come to me that are independents. They just, around our age or around, a little older than us or whatever. They're kind of in their mid-career, maybe a little younger too. And they want to have this amazing kind of identity and all this, but they don't realize how much work, even if I was to like individually take it on and it just be me and them, how much more work I have to do because they're, so small. And at the beginning of this, it's different for a large company to spend 8,000 blink of an eye and be like, okay, we did an exercise.
Right.
And a very, very small independent, 8,000 is a lot for someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and so it's like, I think that's like such a crazy thing that I wish, I want to unpack I don't know when, whether now or, whenever, but, how do we make design more accessible?
Yeah.
Where it's not, harming us from being able to live, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of work,
Yeah. And I would counter that by saying design is very accessible. Just look at the plethora of $50 templates you can buy
Touche.
between
No,
Canva and
You're
all
right.
in
You're right.
Squarespace and all those things.
Yeah.
Strategy is not accessible right now. And like effective brand thinking is not accessible. And I think that's partly we need to figure out a better way to educate like people that of its value, not necessarily you and I specifically, but the world needs to like better understand that concept, because I think that's why the price and the value isn't matching for a lot of people. Where they think like, I can't spend $8,000 on this, because they don't know if that $8,000 is going to make them $8,000. So they're like, why would I do that? Versus, and we don't necessarily know that if you spend $8,000 with us, you're going to make that $8,000 back, even if we give you the right answer. It's so contingent on, are you marketing? Are you doing this thing? Do you have an audience that matches? Do you do this? Like,
yes and no, though. Because it's like, they're like, just to, not to toot my own horn here, but I'm just saying, like, in the sequence that I bring people through with me and, my projects, time and time again, I see their sales bloom. I can't say if they're going to do it consistently if they stop marketing. I can't do anything. If they, again, work with a lot of consumers, right? So consumer goods. If their product doesn't taste good, I can't do anything about that. But I've had plenty of successful clients that went through the sequence of working with me. These are concierge, strategy isn't, you can't put it in a kit. There are certain things that you just have to be so custom with every time, which is why you get the results you do, right? And it's never guaranteed. Sure, there are other factors. However, if they listen to you and use the work that you've developed for them, and that strategist is really good at understanding the landscape, checking in with you, the expertise that you have and emphasizing that, what happens when, they turn that $8,000 around? And I've had clients sell out in an entire year, in a matter of a month. Or, you're never going to know until you do it. You can't ever guarantee until someone full throttles it.
Yeah.
But then when that happens, we're not getting checks after they just made like 500% on our work too.
Right.
So like, where does that land us? How are we supposed to prove this beforehand?
Yeah. I guess you would say, here's my track record, which is valid. And that's kind of the only way you can do it, because there is no guarantee that design or that design alone is going to get you that ROI.
No, but if you already have, I guess there's certain aspects where it's like, I think it is our responsibility to turn certain people down when we know their financial health of the business, where they're at, how much of that they're taking away from their business to begin with to work with us. Is it an ethical, reasonable number? Are they putting all their eggs in a basket? I would hope you're working with a designer or a design team that's like, hey, that's more than 10% of your year.
Right.
Maybe think about this if you're a small business,
Yeah. Well, then how does that apply to your situation with these smaller business clients coming in? Do you feel like you can justify that working with you is going to be worth the price? Are you saying it's a risk?
No, I'm saying that I think it justifies it. I just think that I think sometimes you just are faced with someone that doesn't have enough money, and it's tough because you want to be able to work with everyone and anyone. But
so
strategically, sometimes it doesn't work.
I think that is the case for everybody should niche. in some way, because your service is not going to be for somebody at some level. And the better you can move those people to someone that can actually help or towards something that's better for them, the better for both of you. I have a client that wanted, I think we talked about this the last recording we did, where like they wanted to do a big brand change and a new website and put all these different things in motion, and they did not have the money to pay for that, which is fine. But I had to tell them, like, this is not, while I can do a good job at all of those things for you and you could have a beautiful brand and website, it's not going to help you if you don't have, you know, a marketing plan at all. If you don't have ways of actually getting this website in the hands of people. So it's of course going to seem like it's way too much money to pay for something like that, because for you it is. Like, we need to better spend your money towards something that's going to move the needle for your business. And then we can get to a point where we can actually pay this money and do a big project. I think Alex Hormozy talks about how it's your job as a marketer is to educate your prospect to the point where your services are what they need. So you don't necessarily have to market to people that are already willing to pay, but you give away the information that gets the people to the place where they can buy from you. So that's where, like, giving out like a brand course or a brand worksheet or something like that can get somebody closer to that point of, I can get these steps involved so that I am the right customer for you. And that we can work together.
Yeah.
But I think it's advantageous for everybody to say, like, I don't serve everybody then. Like, I'm not for people with $500 to blow because they don't have it to blow on me. What I can get you for $500 isn't going to make that $500 back.
Yeah.
And it's better for you in terms of changing who's coming to your door so that you're spending less time. Like, I guess this gets back to the reason why people want a niche in the first place. Apart from just make money, it's to better use their time effectively. You know, there's this relationship between time and money and not having enough. And we want to do really good, impactful projects, but we don't want to have to, you know, update our portfolio a million times to fit the right person and tweak it and do all that stuff. We don't want to like throw Facebook, Instagram posts at the wind and hope they stick. We want to have some kind of target in mind that we can actually see results from and measure. And it's all, I mean, I think there's no correct formula for it, but you just got to keep refining in that direction and make some effort to figure out what it is for you. Like, I don't think we can get it perfect, like on the first pass, but I think there are steps you can take to start being aware of what niches you fit in and which ones are right for you, rather than just letting it go wild.
Yeah.
End of rant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we started talking about your situation specifically, I thought, you know, you're perfectly niched for CPG because you have, that's the thing is, like, you have a lot of really valuable expertise on what it means to design in the CPG space. So you have the expertise, the specialization. The question now is, do you want to market to those people? Like, do you want to have a solely CPG based company or audience? Are they marketable? Like, can you reach them in some kind of fashion? And, you know, does the product match the price? I think a lot of those things are true. I think the price is definitely matching what they can pay and afford and understand the value of. I think the question is whether you want to focus on them for your own reasons or not, and figure out like what channels they appear in so that you can send stuff to them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I actually hired a marketing strategist for like a evaluation, like a 1 hour evaluation last week. And it was interesting. I started out talking about, I want to like refocus, get back into consumer and like all this stuff. And as we kind of started talking, she was like, doesn't sound like that's where you want to be. And I was like, maybe this is the problem. You know, but it was wonderful. And I highly recommend it to people that it's very difficult to be, especially someone that's got sort of a strategy role, to strategize around yourself. You kind of need that sounding board. And we talked about doing it for one another too, and just kind of trying to break down where we're going.
So that's what that meant. Okay.
What do you mean?
When you were talking about doing like an exercise together, I was like, oh, it's going to be this. And now I understand better. It's like, oh, you want to do like niching and evaluate. Okay.
Maybe. Well, I don't know if I want to do niching or evaluating or just discovering something. But when I was talking to this person, it was specifically around niching and understanding like, look, I have this portfolio, I have all this stuff, but I want to be more intentional with my marketing. I'm not a marketing expert. I'll be the first to admit. I definitely kiss the line of it all the time in my work, but it isn't my specialty. And so, I was talking to her and kind of looking at all different ways of kind of differentiation and stuff. Yeah, it was very, very nice to have like a sounding board. So
yeah,
I'm at the very beginning of it.
Can you share like where you think it's headed?
For me,
like the takeaways from that? Did you feel pushed in any direction?
So what was interesting is, I have so the portfolio that I have online, I'm going to pull it in front of me so I can talk through this.
This is every designer that has to talk about their portfolio has to look at their portfolio to remember what they put in there.
Just, where am I, right?
Right.
Okay, so I have a featured project section, which is, to be honest, I go back and forth, right? I have about a dozen featured projects. Are you going to my site too?
Yeah, I'm looking too.
Okay.
It's like we should screen share this at some point.
Can we do you after this?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we could do it live. Yeah.
Just do it live.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So I have a dozen featured projects. Something to just like side note. In my head, I'm like, I've done like 200 projects the last 8 years. I'm just showing things that I like. You know what I mean? Yeah. That were really lovely and had really great results. Anyway, so I'm talking about consumer products and design and education and so forth. And so what she did was she was really about talking about not necessarily exactly kind of like where you were going at the beginning of this conversation, and not really focusing on the CPG aspect, but actually like the qualities of like, why do people hire me?
Yeah.
And there's a level of my work that you can tell I've worked in corporate at some point. It's not super boutique. Artists are attracted to it too. There is this like artistic approach to it.
Yeah.
I have a background in food. That's clearly an awareness. So we're starting to get into the differentiation. We're not talking about CPG. We're talking about differentiation. So it's like those qualities kind of came through on the call. I don't know if you have specific like questions you want to ask me.
No, I'm absorbing. I'm looking at the portfolio as you're speaking about it, and I'm like, yeah, I see. So I see.
Yeah. So when you see like my work, I'm thinking about reformatting my portfolio right now so that I can kind of more, right now it's really a first phase. I don't have any active case studies on this. I mean, I have a bunch of images from the case studies up so you can kind of see the beginnings, but that's still in all of my like intro decks and my capabilities decks. I have not brought them to my digital like landscape. This has been kind of a work in progress. But yeah, so I was just kind of talking to her, and we were very much talking more about company size and things like, that we've mentioned. I don't think there was anything it's an hour with a marketing strategist. Nothing groundbreaking, right? You need to be there with full time. But what she did do was she just kind of really clarified, just being a sounding board with me and saying, well, why do you think you need to be highlighted in just CPG, and it doesn't even sound like you're excited about it. And I needed someone to kind of tell me that, you know what I mean? Which sounds crazy, but yeah. So
I've been sitting on this quote that I want to share, that it's from Blair Enns, who wrote the great book, Win Without Pitching, which we talked about before.
Yeah.
And I did a little reread this morning, like just trying to pull some things. He said, as everybody's like trying to figure out what their niche is, I feel like everybody thinks about it.
Can we pause for a sec? anyone that hasn't read this, it's a dense, small, tiny book. It's a very dense read, but a wonderful read. And it's baked with, I think mine's upstairs, but I've been reading it.
A5. It's a tiny little
really
book.
Small, and it's
A4.
dense. You need to get your coffee, get ready, because it's very dense. Do you agree? I think it's dense.
Do.
But it's wonderful.
I think I've talked about both of these books before. I feel like they go so hand in hand, so much that the two authors have their own podcast together called Two Bobs Podcast.
Do they really?
Yeah, they do.
What is it called?
The Two Bobs Podcast, I believe.
Okay.
Maybe I'm making that up. I hope I'm not.
David Baker and Blair Enns.
Yeah. All right, I got it right.
Oh, yeah. Gotta add it to my podcast queue. Okay.
They're both they're maybe 100 pages, maybe less, but they're tiny little pages because it's a small book. But yeah, it's full of like such good information on niching, marketing, business structure, kind of what you're working towards. I think it's great. And from that book, Blair Enns says, the best niche often transcends industry. It's about solving a distinct problem. And two examples are like, you could say niching technically could be like, I design websites for dentists. Okay, you've narrowed down to dentists, but a stronger niche would be, I create high converting brand platforms for service-based businesses. Like, I think the key thing is that you can niche in a number of different ways. You could do it by industry, say branding for fintech startups. You could do it by client size, small service-based businesses. ChatGPT is clearly pulling from my website to come up with examples. By geography, upstate New York businesses, by service offering, conversion-focused web design, or by problem, increasing retention for subscription-based businesses.
Let me dive in, though.
Yeah.
You're going to use, maybe we didn't clarify this earlier. There are a web of tools when you are going to want to send out a message that says, hey, I work for this service, and this service. And then there's going to be other moments when you just go high level and talk about the pain points and what you're actually solving. Both are extremely valuable. Both interchange and work together.
Yeah. This is not, you have to do all of these. These are different ways you can narrow down the audience.
And you can do them simultaneously, though.
Right. You can mix and match.
Not that you have to do all of them, but I guess I'm kind of emphasizing that you should do a mix of them at the same time.
Yeah. I would say do as many as you can, feasibly.
Yeah.
That'll still give you enough audience to pay your bills, you know? But Blair's saying that, like, it goes beyond just saying, I only work with these customers. It's, I solve a very distinct problem. That's not necessarily confined to a specific industry or a specific geography. It's like, it could be anybody that has this same problem. And I think that's probably what your marketing expert is suggesting for you. It's like, you don't necessarily, while you do have a lot of expertise with one particular type of client, you also solve a very distinct problem for them.
That are all connected.
That are all connected.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel as a designer evaluating themselves, it's like, I can feel that they're all connected, but I don't know how to articulate it all the time. Like exactly what that connection is. Yeah. Well, I wonder if you feel that way too, where it's like, I know there's something here, but what specifically is it? Do you feel that?
With mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why I hired, a consultant for a blip of a second, just like to get me kind of in the right space. And I'm still kind of analyzing that call. But yeah, I mean, definitely. I think you fall not too far from me, though, in regards to there are a lot of designers out there that have not worked in corporate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that have only done agency or small mom and pop stuff.
Yeah. And that's a different trajectory of skill set.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say when I look at your portfolio, I think it's interesting.
Mine's a lot more corporate leaning.
Yeah, I would say big business, but you have a very versatile kind of like palette in regards to your portfolio. But yeah, I would say Yeah, your powerhouse is in the digital space.
Yeah.
However you want to look at that.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't specifically say like digital. I do say that
You
I
don't need
focused
to.
on, that's
I don't think. Sorry.
good point. Good point. That's enough.
Sorry.
That's all you had to say.
Did I call you out?
That's perfect. Yeah. I mean, we could roast my website if you want. I'm happy with
Roast
that.
Jake's website. No, there's nothing to roast. I guess, okay. Well, I would say, I'm not sure if are we going niching here? I think Made by Us, Grow Dev, and what else is going on here? Do you have just a portfolio section? Oh, you do work. Okay. All right. So AM Design Collective, Kate Miller Photography, Two Hands Jewelry Design. These are small clients, right?
Yes.
That feels different than Made by Us, Grow Dev, Human Tell, Time Warner, and Yaxi. And Time Warner, I do like that you go different with the thumbnail. But if I'm being totally honest, I want to see digital for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would say. And then the Human Tell, I would also just do a better thumbnail personally.
Yeah, that one needs a better thumbnail. I was trying to
I mean, I'm not trying to roast you.
No, you're right. No, please roast away. This is the feedback I need. Yeah, I was trying to vary up like a different format of images when you see them all together. So you have some that's like just the logo, some that's a collection of screens, some that's a single screen. But yeah, I think in isolation, it could be a different thumbnail. There's a lot of work I want to do to this website that I feel
we all do.
Is the eternal struggle of being a designer. It's like you want to change everything about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I say that I niche for nonprofits and service providers. And I think the clients that I show demonstrate that a bit. And then just by articulating the problems in my like landing page, I think that's a good way to kind of communicate who this is for and not for, and kind of what my focus is. That's the challenge, right? Like with niching, you need to name and claim. You need to say, I'm for these people, and this is what I can do for them. That's specific. And I think the more specific you can get, the better, but you don't have to necessarily nail it the first go around.
Yeah. I think, all right.
Also,
strong opinions.
Don't use my website as a perfect example of niching either. This is not.
I'm not.
We need to caveat this as
neither of us. We are talking about how we are trying to niche here.
Right.
Everyone help us out. Just kidding. No, okay. So strong opinions here. I love how on your work section. Feel free if you want to cut the. I don't mean to. I hope this is okay.
No, it's fine.
So Made by Us, this is what I like about the thumbnails. Made by Us and Grow Dev shows that there's strategy baked into it. So there's type, there's brand identity. I know when I click it, I'm going to get those kind of things within this that I just see them as like great. You're high level, you're strategic, it resonates, right? Human Tell, while you do branding, and I think that you do branding well, I think that Human Tell needs to, the way that the other two thumbnails Made by Us and Grow Dev go, right? And then same with Time Warner somehow. Like Time Warner, Human Tell, Yaxi. I don't know what I would do with Two Hands, Caitlin Miller, and AM Design. They're beautiful. They're great work. I just think that's where you're crossing over the niche, right? That's a totally different, I don't think it's doing anything for you.
Yeah.
If you're trying to stay in that service digital, and I think you are. And I think it's already there in your portfolio. And I don't know if you need more than 4 or 5. I don't know if I would do like maybe 4, maybe 5. I would drop a whole line in your portfolio. That's what I personally. Yeah. Personally, I think that's.
Speaking as someone who has 12 on their website.
I know. Well, I'm trying to get rid of that too, maybe. I don't know. No, I know.
Yeah, no, those projects you pointed out are some of the older projects I've done where my responsibilities have changed drastically. Ironically, Human I had the most influence and responsibility for, but it just looks like a branding project. But I was the full-on creative director for them, like changing a lot of different things at that company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like the limitations that I notice with my stuff.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's funny. The portfolio is a weird part of your whole brand where it's like, how much is too much? How little is too little? Because like, ideally you want to just move them into a call where you can get to diagnosing their problem and figuring out if they're fit. But you also need to demonstrate expertise. So the portfolio is both a sales tool in that way. But
yeah, I mean, the more I think about it, I don't know. I mean, hear me out. I think it's nice to have an archive of work, but I don't know if you need more than like 4 or 5 pieces.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The world is changing so fast and tech is changing so fast, and trying to update all of this probably isn't really our best like place and best place of energy.
Yeah. I think here's my hot take. I think portfolios are rapidly diminishing in importance relative to social media.
I agree.
While I think you need to show off good content, like good work somewhere, and really explain what's going on, I think its prevalence as like, this is going to shift gears from somebody who is interested to I'm buying has changed, where it's more valuable to demonstrate that through social media, regular content, where they can get a whole vibe of who you are beyond just like, here's my one case study. You kind of need to demonstrate a much broader, I guess it's a broader expertise, but it's really just a more varied, showing more applications for that same expertise. I've seen plenty of people whose websites are like one page, have barely any work on it, and it's like, go to my YouTube channel or go to my Instagram, and you can see all my work there.
Yeah.
And then book a call. And like, that can be really effective. I think it depends on the person.
Well, that's why I'm saying, and this is maybe just the influence of like where my head's at right now, but even looking at your site and thinking about it, like paring it down to like 5 pieces, like I'm thinking about actively doing that as well. Because I don't think that it's doing me, I had this thought, I updated it last year, and I was like late last year too. It hasn't been that long since I've updated my portfolio. And I was like, oh, I'll put up a bunch of like, like just thumbnails of the whole strategic experience, but not going to the strategy of. And I think a huge part of that too is that like, I want to respect a lot of the work that I do, especially when it gets into like differentiation, all the things we're talking about. These are like internal decks, like for my clients. They're a lot, like, even if they're, they've launched and they're in the world, that work is still up to them how much they want to disclose of that. And I value that strongly, to respect that line. I have seen designers just like, do whatever they want, which don't agree with. But yeah, so like, to me, I think that I'm trying to find that sort of timeless, just enough information on a website, and actually kind of like push more into, like the benefits and the thoughts and theories and the strategy, as opposed to like the visual aspect.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. I think as designers, it's important to have really good visuals, but it's even more important to explain how you got there as strategists. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all confined to one project. It could be a broader, like, here's my strategic approach and it applies to this kind of thing. My brain as a web designer and developer is like, we need to both give people enough information to get interested, but we also need to pull back so it's not a bitch to maintain. We need like the right sweet spot of getting people to click, book a call, or learn more, but also not have to reinvent the wheel every time we post a new case study.
Yeah.
I've seen some websites where like every case study is like a microsite. It's like a completely different experience from one project to the next. And I'm like, they must be huge and have a ton of money to do that because it takes so long.
Or there's people that really harness, I think that it's really dangerous. We've talked about it, like social media, things that algorithms you're not in control of.
Yeah.
But, I see some of these designers out there and you're like 50% of your time must be just keeping up with status quo on social media. Because I've, over the last year, I've tried to be a little more active, which is not much, just a little more active. And I can tell you firsthand, just me trying to put together these things, like for a couple rounds of applause is absurd, the amount of time that these designers are going through and doing that. And maybe it's working out. Honestly, maybe it is something I need to take a page out of. I'm still trying to figure that out. But yeah, I think that same thing goes with, being online and, your website.
Yeah. To add to that, I've been doing the same thing, like trying to be more active on social media. And the posts that I've written that I feel have like the most value, the most like I'm proud of, have the most insight, so much less engagement than the simple like here's 10 things I would do about this that like got me thousands of like impressions and things like that. It's crazy what gets clicks and what doesn't. And
there's no rhyme or reason. It's so weird.
I don't know if you I assume you kind of feel the same way, but correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like we're very aware of how flooded with useless information we get from social media that we try and create things that are a little more sticky and more valuable and more meaningful. And that's just not the game on social media. It's just not.
It's not what
and like
people
trying
want.
to find the balance of posting regularly, but also posting things that you're proud of is more difficult than it seems.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This episode is both niching and portfolios, I think. I think we're shifting the topic of this one.
Yeah, well, I do think, going back to niching though, like, and talking about that again, I think that it's tethered to marketing is what we're kind of lending to.
Yeah.
Because
this is the line of marketing.
Kisses the line.
Yeah.
Love that.
I like that phrase.
Yeah, I use it a lot.
Yeah,
but
no, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's so hand in hand with marketing, and it gets even muddier when you're in the brand field, because that also kisses the line of marketing. That it's hard to separate what's what. I want to just to add to this, part of why I was so excited about talking about this week and what kind of brought it on. I have been so overwhelmed with like taking on different kinds of work that I normally do that kiss the line of marketing more than I'm familiar with, that I started to be like, well, am I really an expert in this? Do I really know what to say? Is that really what they're asking of me? And it took a minute to be like, I don't have to be everything. I can just be the brand focus on this, and what they do with their marketing is what they do. And like by finding some separation between the two, it allowed me to get back on track and focus on what I'm good at and what they wanted, and not kind of muddy the waters.
I want to say, speaking from like building off of that, speaking from having a recent, I have this long-term client that I've been working with. They recently hired a social media strategist for their marketing. And I have to tell you, I've been cracking up. I love his work. He's been just watching him like interact with the work that we developed for the company. And I mean, we couldn't, my whole team that I have built for like the brand strategy and components that we build out, marketing requires a level of being able to break things. And branding brings things together, right? Branding brings everything together. Marketing like breaks into the world and shares a voice and finds a way to get it to resonate in a totally different level of metrics. And so to be someone that is healing a company when, and then, the position of kind of like breaking a door down, and to announce a company is two totally different people. I'm sorry. It's two totally different skill sets. It really is. And it's a very difficult struggle to try to combine those two, because the brand designer is going to brand in marketing, and the marketing designer is going to market in the branding component. And it's like, trying to take an orchestra and do improv with no sheet music. You know what I mean? It's like we're doing the sheet music. They're doing the timing. They know, you know what I mean? They know how to get the audience there, get them to hear it at the right time. Like, I really do use this analogy a lot, is like thinking of it like an orchestra. We as brand designers choose the instruments. We develop the sheet music. We know the composer. We have that control, but they are two different skills.
100%. And I want to shout out a business that I look up to and learned a lot from. It's a business called Focus Lab, led up by Bill Kenny, if you follow him on LinkedIn. They went through kind of the same growing pains of being a B2B brand development company, brand design, and they intentionally don't touch marketing, because they've said that the two have been so conflated, and knowing where one starts and one stops has been so difficult to express publicly, that they're focused solely on the brand side and want to let marketing kind of do what it does. Because they both inform each other, but they are 100% different things. And I really like how you created the analogy of branding as healing and marketing is about breaking. I feel like branding is totally like an act of unification, and marketing is an act of disruption. And they both need to kind of work together. But as soon as you try and make them the same thing, it's all a mess.
You just have how do you make, say you have one person that you look to for branding and marketing. How do you tell someone who's a natural healer to disrupt the market, or vice versa? That's just a very difficult, I am so for this whole phase of designers getting into motion and getting I love the engagement of motion and AI, and sure, I'm happy to add to the palette of things to make things more complex and dynamic as we grow, into the future. That's how it's always been. But branding and marketing are two different people. It's it's very difficult to try to get that person to look. You're looking at it, you have to look at it nearly in an opposite light. Right?
Yeah. Well, you need to figure out what's true about the company with brand, and then you need to figure out how that reflects with the customer with marketing. I guess you do both with brand, but it's more about activating those audiences more than it is speaking to them.
We had this conversation on another subject that I actually, it's bringing up a point that I now realize is really relevant to this. Remember when we were talking about brand guidelines?
Yes.
And how they should be
self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. And I find myself in places where I really like to give an instruction or go through a workshop, especially when I'm working with a marketing team. Because it's so fascinating to see how they take those brands, because they're all breakers, right? They're all trying to do it. And it creates a great, that workshop creates such an interesting, fascinating, and this is specific, I should say, this is specific when you're handing this off to a marketing team.
Yeah.
That you have in-house marketing efforts going on. Because what's amazing about that is that you get to be in that place where you have healers and breakers, and you have to find that line together. And they're going to have their own sense of theory and thought that morph the instructions of the brand, basically, and guidelines.
Yeah, and it makes me think, if you are both the marketing department and the brand department, if you're a very small team, maybe 3 people, or you're doing it all yourself, it's important to kind of separate those ideas in your mind. That the branding does not have to be the marketing. You kind of want to set one up before you finish the other.
and this is a bias because we're independent designers probably, but I believe that if you're going through a rebrand, you should always source out a third party for a rebrand. Marketing, I think, is absolutely achievable in-house, if not encouraged in certain ways. It really depends. There are third-party marketing, agencies that absolutely make sense why you would have one. But for a lot of, say, like larger, both you and I touch corporate or just like, fun people that are growing into corporate, that, you can say things that they can't. And so, and branding, you need to have that level of honesty in branding. But then from a marketing standpoint, it's a lot easier to kind of, I don't know. I find it easier to get to that finish line when I have some marketing and creative in-house, but we're taking care of the brand. And it's just far easier with the C-suite or whoever, the stakeholders. So
yeah,
that's just my thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, clearly we could keep talking about brands forever.
Yeah.
And
well, what are our takeaways? What are our takeaways?
Yeah, I would say if you're approaching a niching effort, maybe a rethink of your portfolio, of your brand, I would say just think that you can always find something to be more specific about, like cater to a more specific audience, cater to a more specific problem. The closer you can get to that, the better, I think, in my opinion. You don't have to have it perfect, but it's something to strive for. And try and find what that expertise is. Those are my 2 little points. I think try and figure out how you can take something you're doing over and over and convert that into something you can take with you into the next project, whether that's data, whether that's collecting feedback, whether that's building templates for yourself or processes that make it better. Those are the things that are going to help not only you deliver a better product, but also differentiate yourself from others as you continue to niche.
And the takeaways I would give is actually, I would do an assignment. This is like a very quick exercise.
There we go. Okay.
Where I think you should, part of niching is really finding your love and excitement and matching it with a scalable offering, right? That's like why we all want to do this. So I would say make a list of what makes you most excited, whether that's a type of client, type of industry, doesn't have to be, but you're out the things that you really love that you don't want to sacrifice. And then figure out a list of things that are your non-negotiables and niche around the non-negotiables. That's what I would say.
I like that. Niche around the non-negotiables. I think you said that before too. That's a really good way to put it. Just to add one more thing, I would say also, a niche doesn't have to be permanent. You can experiment and hypothesize. Does this work? Does this not work? It might take some time, but you don't have to get it right.
There is a great quote out there. I can't remember it. They've referenced kind of a similar thing. I'm going to botch this, but the idea will be resonate. So when thinking of a portfolio, when thinking of any of these we think of these as designers a huge task, right? We're like, oh my God, I have to niche. Oh, it's this big thing, right? But, years of work can be done in a weekend.
Yeah.
You understand that perspective? What I mean.
Yeah, it's the Pablo Picasso example.
Pablo Picasso. Now, I was actually thinking there's a quote. It's from, I think, a Russian guy that said years, it's something about centuries can happen in
overnight
months
or
weeks and then the opposite can be told true as well. A couple swift moods might take a decade to happen, because it sequentially needs to happen that way. And in other moments, revolutions happen within seconds, right? So I would definitely apply that kind of perspective with this, where it's anyone can change their website within a matter of a day or two if you really put your mind to the right things and you're smart about it. So don't try to overthink it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. It's funny, I've been rereading a lot of these books, like the Win Without Pitching, A Business of Expertise, and some of these other books that because I've changed since the last time I read them, I'm noticing so many different things.
Oh, interesting.
I think you get a different experience based on how you've changed. I was talking with our friends at Space Out, and they were getting advice from a mentor of theirs and giving them really like correct things to do, powerful things that they could do, but it kind of went over their heads because they weren't ready to accept it yet. You know, and that now looking in hindsight, they're like, oh yeah, that's what he meant by that, or that's what we should do. And like, I think rereading old books is my recommendation for this week because you'll get something new out of it.
I have been reading all of the books that you know this. You've been referencing all of these books and they're on my shelf. If they're not on my shelf, I've bought in a couple, but I have most of them. And I was like, why have I not? You know what I love about this podcast? And I'll stop after this. I know you got to go. Do you have a 1 p.m.?
I do have a 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll keep it quick. But I just wanted to say is that when you do this for like 8 years on an independent track, you forget about the practices and stuff from year 1. And like, you are invigorating me to like do those deeds of like, okay, wait a minute. Let me learn about strategy again from a different, or storytelling or pitching or any of these kind of business expertise. So I've been loving your references, and I also have been hearing from feedback that they're loving them too. So I love that you keep adding them. So.
We'll have to do like a recommended book list or something at some point. Put it in the comments if that's something you want.
Recommended list.
Right.
Paid. No, I'm just kidding.
No, though maybe. No,
maybe.
Not.
I don't know. Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, right?
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Working with Designers. Kristin and I would love to hear from you. Please give us a like and send us your thoughts on whatever platform you're listening to this on. And let us know what questions you want us to talk about in the next episode by filling out our contact form at workingwithdesigners.com. Thanks and have a good week.